Good afternoon, Westwood, and welcome to the Wolverine Report. Evan Cardimino, you got Michael McGrail on the switches. I'm Morgan Donahue. And folks, we are delighted to have two special guests. That are part of a unique category. When it comes to the Westwood High School Hall of Fame for sports, these two are part of the category of one of three to be inducted as father and son who are both in the Hall of Fame for their respective sports. Two people that have been major players in Westwood sports, in the history of Westwood sports, and an amazing story. I got to play with one of them and be a part of history with one of them and some of the best memories of my life. And to hear also the stories throughout the years of his father and what he did on the playing fields and the records he set, and also just the amazing path he had of being the first player to be drafted by a professional sports team out of Westwood High School and the local sports team. Just an amazing story. And we are delighted to have him here to talk about it. We have Joe Fabiano, Jim Fabiano, Westwood High School Hall of Famers. Guys, how are you? Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Morgan.
Doing great. Thank you, Morgan. Quite the introduction.
Absolutely. Well, guys, really appreciate having you on here. It's a story I think is a terrific story in Westwood, and it's not even just you guys. You have sisters that are tremendous athletes, Hall of Fame athletes. A brother, tremendous athlete, Hall of Famer as well. But the Fabianos, Joe and Jim. We've seen you on the sidelines. We've seen Joe play. We've learned about your career throughout the years. The first question I want to ask you guys is, when you think about your time at Westwood High School, how special was it for both of you? And, what are some of those kind of immediate memories that come to mind when you think about your time at Westwood?
Yeah, maybe I'll start, Joey. I feel just tremendously fortunate. I was actually born in Dedham.
Yeah.
My father and mother went to Dedham High School.
Yeah.
And my dad, as maybe we talked about earlier, is a Hall of Famer at Dedham High. And so I thought we were going to be Dedham.
Yep.
Marauders.
Yeah.
And as fate would have it, my parents moved us to Westwood. I think I was 1 or 2 years old. And certainly I'm thrilled with that move. I don't know if Dedham Athletics is thrilled with that, but it's been an unbelievable journey, an unbelievable experience, a phenomenal town to grow up in and certainly play sports in.
Yeah. And Joe, for you, how special was your time at Westwood High School, your athletic experience, and what are some of those memories that come to mind, with your time?
It was incredibly special. I think, at a young age, quickly realized how important Westwood was to my family when I had 3 aunts, a father, an uncle, all in the Hall of Fame. Grandparents that grew up in Dedham, but eventually moved to Westwood and became a really important part of their life, and eventually became a big part of mine. So when I got to Westwood, it felt like I'd reached the major leagues after hearing about it for so long, and realizing how important it was to my family. So I think I learned to appreciate it a lot more, maybe than some others at an earlier age. I think eventually people got there, but it was just a really special place to grow up. So many friendships over the years, obviously a lot of success, a lot of special memories.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about the Fabiano name with sports, I think about two things. I think about amazing athletes. I think about amazing competitors. And Jim, you had 2 of the best parents anyone could ever ask for. What attributes do you think came from, mom and dad when it comes to competitiveness and leadership and, just athleticism? Is it a mixture of both, or, what are some of those attributes that you think came from mom and dad?
Oh, probably many. I think the thing that stands out to me, first of all, my dad was a standout athlete, but
yeah.
My mom was as well.
Yeah.
Of course, women didn't have all the opportunities men did back in those days, but she was a super athlete. Her sister was a great athlete, and I think my uncle,
yeah.
My mother's brother, was also a former minor league player as well. He went to Dedham High,
Yeah.
So it was kind of in the genes, sort of along the way. But I think the thing that I take away from my parents certainly was just a gift of athletics, but also they taught us how to handle that.
Yeah.
We were able to excel at a young age, which was great, but they taught us to manage that in the way that we carried ourselves outside, on the field and off the field, which I think is a valuable lesson, that I took away. The sports and all the championships and the glory and all that is great, but it matters more who you are, in the community and as an individual than than anything we could do on the field. So kept us kind of in the right headspace.
Yeah. I mean, parents shape us. They kind of help us with our mindsets. And if you have good parents that give you, those positive mindsets on the playing field when it comes to work hard, be a good teammate, to sportsmanship, these are also things that carry over in life. How much would you both say the stuff you learned on the playing fields, playing not only just big games, but also playing games at the highest of levels, has shaped you with being able to tackle any of the challenges that come on that we face in life?
I think it was a huge piece. I think, from a competitive standpoint, I mean, just to learn, being a good teammate, all those things you carry with you until you into your professional career, and being a parent and all the normal things, from a day-to-day perspective. Certainly learned a lot from my father. I think he'd probably say the opposite, because wasn't many times I was listening to him on when he was giving advice, although I probably should have taken it. But I think it was, so many of those things I learned at Westwood and still carry with me to this day.
It's funny you made that comment, but as my father and mom were an example to me, I certainly tried to be the same, example to Joey and Tina and Anthony, and just let them, take their wings and do what they were going to do with it, as long as at the end of the day, people would say, they're good kids, they're good people. We respect the accomplishments on the field, but it always mattered to me. That was a given, the sports, that was a given. It was a God gift, but who they were in the community and as people mattered to me more than anything else. Looking at Joey's career, I wish I had half the competitive nature that he did, and maybe I would have spent 10 years in the major leagues. But he was a warrior. I did things a little bit quieter, but I wish I had half of his competitiveness.
Yeah, it's an old school mindset. Do it the right way. Yeah. At the end of the game, win the right way, because people aren't going to remember the game; they're going to remember the person. Yeah. And I'm going to say Jim Fabiano. What a heck of an athlete, but even better person. If anyone says that about an athlete, that's like the ultimate compliment.
It wasn't worth sacrificing who I was or how people thought of me for what I could do in sports. Yeah. Because let's face it, kids today, I think there's a lot of pressure on young kids today to excel or get a scholarship for college, or never mind try to go professional. Yeah. Not many of them will. Yeah. And I think sometimes putting too much pressure on kids, I'm not sure is the right approach. Yeah. Any chance I had, any opportunity I had to coach along the way, my goal was to make sure every kid left feeling good about the experience, regardless of what it was. Yeah. But they left the field going, hey, that was fun, win or lose.
Absolutely.
For you guys, it seems like sports are a family affair, and, sports are so, in my family, me and my father, we bonded watching football every Sunday. But my dad coached me in flag football as a kid, and you had Joe Sr. as a coach. Can you talk a little bit about having your dad as a coach and kind of what that meant to you when he was coaching? Brutal.
It's funny. My dad wasn't really active as a coach. Like, in other words, running the team. He was a coach behind the scenes more than on the sidelines or in the dugout. And I respected that. He kind of let me do my thing. I remember I would complain to him once in a while and say, hey, can you talk to the coach of the baseball team? I'm a better shortstop than that kid. Like, why is he playing and I'm not playing? You got to talk to him. And he'd say, I'm not talking to him. Yeah. You got to let your playing do your talking for you. And if you're good enough to play, you'll get a chance. And when you get your chance, make the most of it. Otherwise, keep at it. But so he was more of a coach behind the scenes than he was really kind of on the field.
And he was a pivotal person, from what I understand, for a Pop Warner program.
Yes, one of the founding members of that.
With Brad Pindell's father too. They were, they were big in developing that in Westwood, and thank God they did, because when you look at like Westwood and the history that came after that, like the teams of the 80s and 90s, Eric Wolfinger and what he did, unbelievable. But it starts before then. Like, I would argue, Joe, our Super Bowl championships, it started before Pindell and Hallian. Phil Azak, Jim Fabiano, Federico, and Hoffer were, I think, just, were important figures in that because they developed us,
Yeah.
and they did it at an age. They taught us technique. Phil Azak was coaching us like a college coach when we were like 13 years old. So, guys like your dad and Brad Pindell's father, so beneficial to, the success of a lot of the teams that followed through,
Yeah, he did a great job.
Yeah. Great era that you guys lived in. Joe, early 2000s, unbelievable. When you think about football, you think about hockey, girls basketball, and even every other team, was either in the playoffs or working towards, a long run in the playoffs, deep run in the playoffs. Jim, your era, unbelievable. Bill Irvine was telling me there was like an award they used to give to schools. Like if there was a school that got like the most championships or the most wins.
Is it like a Dalton award?
Dalton, and I think Westwood got it twice in the 70s.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
You guys had amazing baseball teams. You had an amazing hockey team led by Kevin Crowe. You had Dave Rice.
Yeah.
Baseball was amazing. I'm catching up on some of these stories. A guy like Mike Miller on the mound, who I hear has a curveball that was unhittable. I want you to call out some of the players, coaches, teachers that were really special at that time, because I think it's a decade in an era that Westwood doesn't know enough about, and they really should appreciate more of it because, what an amazing time of winning culture in Westwood.
Yeah, no, it was great. And I was very fortunate because I was able to play at the varsity level as a young freshman, and that wasn't easy because the upperclassmen, were all great athletes in their own right, and breaking into that lineup wasn't going to be easy or not going to make some people happy.
Yeah.
But I looked up to those guys. The Brian Harringtons, the Dave Whalens, the Eddie Germanos.
Yeah.
Were just great examples of how to play the game and how to do it well. And I just enjoyed when I got the opportunity to break into the lineup to be part of that group.
Yeah. And batted 500 your senior year. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
How special was that? And were you just dialed in? What?
Yeah, it was, I guess. But I would be remiss, obviously, if I didn't mention Coach Downs.
Yes.
What a legendary coach, a legendary man. How fortunate I was and we were to play for him and know him. He just lived life the right way.
Yeah.
With integrity and in the way that he approached not only life but the game. Certainly, fundamentals. Stressed the fundamentals. I don't know how many days he was out there, and it's 45 degrees out. We're trying to take batting practice, and our fingers are going to break in two. And he's just throwing batting practice, and so devoted, and such just a great guy, great human, and passed away recently, and miss him terribly. And we got a chance to celebrate his life at the end of the month, and then I guess we're going to do an alumni game in the spring in his honor, and I really look forward to that. I mean, just a legend.
He's a special guy. If 50 years later, we're talking about him the same way you are, back then. And we were really fortunate to catch this sort of the tail end of, a lot of the people you were alluding to. I mean, even Dr. Gearin.
Sure.
Yeah.
Certainly Russ Downs. So carried on, the previous generation to the new one with a lot more great people.
Just a remarkable person. So when Joe and I played baseball, he was an assistant that Brian Whalen brought on.
Yes.
And terrific because he continues that Westwood connection.
Yeah.
And then when he's coming in the dugout and saying, "I coached your father," to Joe, he still had plenty to give.
Yeah.
And I always had those one-liners, those kind of dad jokes, that kept you on your toes. We had special handshakes too. If you had a special handshake with Coach Downs, you knew you were someone special.
Oh yeah.
But remarkable man. So
Incredible.
Him and his wife used to take in like foreign exchange students, for many years. And this is a guy that served in the Korean War. He was a medic, and he was, the guy that would go in the front lines and be taking, injured soldiers and trying to save their lives. And not only did he do that for the U.S., he did it for, the Koreans as well.
Yeah.
And, going in and it didn't matter. He wanted to save as many lives possible. And it took a while, from what I understand, for him to talk about that, and eventually got to a place at the middle school where he did. And we got the opportunity, Joe, to hear that story. Him and Mike Niles talked about their experience, and it just created more. If I couldn't have any more respect for Coach Down, it just the ceiling bursted, and so much respect. And his presence is still a part of the culture here of just loving kind of community. We're gonna make mistakes. Don't let it be the end of the world. He was that kind of guy.
Great family, deep faith. Very religious family, and I remember one of the things that stood out was, even more than some of the things on the baseball field, at the end of every season, he would write out a little card to each one of the players, kind of talking about the season and the highlights and some of the things to improve on the next year. I look forward to that as much as anything, just to kind of get his feedback.
Yeah.
And he wrote it out, and it's just very special.
It was thoughtful. He probably took time, and it wasn't
incredible.
just a rushed.
Who does that?
Yeah.
Who does that?
That's professional. Just a pro's pro. So I hear from Dave, friend of the program, Dave Rice, about this legendary station wagon you guys had, a 9-seater. Tell us a little bit about that. So a 9-seater station wagon.
Yeah.
Would you pack that thing to the brim? And was it going to games?
Packed.
And Dave also mentioned he'd hop in for a ride to go see the girls' basketball games too. Was this a legendary car for the Fabiano?
Legendary Chevy Caprice Classic. I think it was actually yellow with wood grain siding.
Yeah.
A rumble seat in the back.
Yeah.
So we had plenty of room for my triplet sisters and my younger brother and friends and equipment and whatever else we needed to get to where we needed to go. So
that's awesome. We got tons of memory. My father had a minivan, and he used to horrify me. And I go, Dad, I can't even get you to drop me off or pick me up from a school dance. No one's gonna dance. No girl's gonna dance with me if I'm coming out of this car. And it had the wood on the side too. And I'm like, this is horrific.
Classic.
You couldn't even just got a one color, So I used to say, drop me off at the senior center, and I'll walk through the side.
Yeah. It's funny, Ricey, good friend and great teammate.
Yeah.
Excellent baseball player, hockey player. He did soccer goalie.
Yeah.
He did everything. And the one thing he remembers is the station wagon.
Yes. Mate, what a remarkable athlete he is. So 2-sport athlete at Westwood, played 2 sports in college.
Yeah.
At Nichols.
Yeah.
Nichols.
Yeah.
And I read a stat where he caught a lot from Mike Miller. And Mike Miller was fast to the plate. When even with curveballs, he was looking at the runner, making sure they're tight to the bag. But he had something like a 90%, 80-90% throw-out rate for people stealing. That's unheard of.
Yeah. So rough guy. Played the game well.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to back down to anybody. Somebody going to try to come and, he's going to block the plate. He had a hard time getting by him.
You're a hockey player at the home plate.
Yeah.
So, question I want to ask you guys who are been there, played in some of the games where the lights are brightest. I want to ask you a question about leadership. What are some of the leadership what are some attributes you think that make a good leader, and who are some of the leaders that you kind of looked up to and learned from during your playing careers, or even maybe before, just people that impacted your your leadership when it came to your sports?
You want to start?
You can go first.
Leadership is where it sort of starts for me. Successful teams have to have leaders. Have to have people who are willing to set an example, who are willing to do what they're asking you to do, and do it at least as well. I think that just from a cultural standpoint, successful teams have to have great leaders, whether that's a coach and or the senior members of the team.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to be the best athletes.
Yeah.
But they take charge of the locker room.
Yeah.
And they set a tone for the rest of the players. Otherwise, you can have a team of a lot of great athletes, but if they can't play together as a team, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. You agree?
Yeah. I agree.
You'd agree.
Yeah, one example I've been saying, I said it to football guys, where Joe in my junior year, we came off like a 5-5 season, and then the next year we went like 10-1, win a Super Bowl, and I think it just shows that when you kind of when a new team comes in and you have goals and you set those goals, and then you have good leadership that are setting the example. Coach Hallian says you're going to have a winning team if your best players are your hardest working players, and you got to kind of have to have that.
Totally.
But I tell a lot of these players, you can have a 500 season and then win a Super Bowl, a championship the next season.
Yeah.
But it's not something that comes easy. What it requires is good leadership. They got to be the hardest working people, and it's got to drip down. You know.
Yeah. And it's in Westwood. I've always been amazed with Westwood. Not the biggest town.
Yeah.
But there was a culture. There was something established.
Yes.
Back in those days.
Yeah.
That we're going to make the most of what we have.
Yeah.
And we're going to leave it all on the field.
Proud.
We'll play some of these bigger towns, but they're not going to outmatch us. They're not going to outrun us or out-hustle us or outwork us.
Yeah.
We don't know if we're going to win, but we're not going to sit back here
No.
and take anything. And whether it's swimming, excelling in swimming, or track and field, or football, baseball, and so many other sports, hockey. What an amazing history the town has of so many different sports teams, and it like girls field hockey or lacrosse, right? It just young girls, young boys look up to those teams and say, "I want to be part of that someday," and it just kind of keeps going, which is so cool to see in our town. I'm so proud of that.
That's something exactly what we talk about is. So I think it started from the 70s. I really do. So I use the girls basketball example, where when you start winning, 96 games in a row, people are filling those courts. Kathy said that, they would start their warm-ups later because she wanted people to be in the gym to be there for warm-ups, because the warm-ups was a show. Or no, she said she would make warm-ups like a show so people would come early to watch them. They would pack that gym in the 70s. And when I had Coach Welby on, we were talking about when you go to see Westwood High School play when you're like in grade school. And that was more important than seeing like the Bruins play or the Patriots. And to see like your next door neighbor doing it, and he just scored a game-winning, point. Those are your heroes. Lindsay Hallian said, like, C. White, and Barr as well, were two girls she looked up to. And I think that culture, it started then because people wanted to go. Kathy would go down to the middle school and she would introduce a Nancy Fabiano to the 7th grade girls, the 6th grade girls. And they were blown away by, these are my heroes. It hasn't stopped since then. And, people stay in Westwood because they want to be the next, Nancy Fabiano, next Ann Deacon, Jim Fabiano, Joe Fabiano.
It's
amazing.
It's
it's so deep in the culture, and it hasn't skipped a generation either.
No.
So you guys both have another special connection to an organization, the Italian Home for Children. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with that organization and how important it is for you guys to give back?
Yeah, well, you want to start? Go ahead, Go ahead.
It's a pretty amazing place. I became ingrained in it early in my life. Probably around the age of 10. My father was a board member for years, and I'd actually be curious to hear as to the origin of why you got involved. But it's a place for underprivileged children, and for me, it's just great to have an opportunity to give back in my spare time. But something that's been a big part of my life since I was a young person. So when I got older in my professional career and had some free time, we started the Emerging Leader Group, and anyway, it's been a great opportunity to give back and be a part of that. It's been a part of my family for a long time.
Yeah, what were some of the origins of you joining the board?
Yeah, so believe it or not, when it first started, it was called the Home for Italian Children, and that's really what it was. It was an orphanage for Italian children, and many years later, it became the Italian Home for Children and serves the greater Boston community. And the children who go there are representative of the community. It's long since been just a home for Italian children, but come to find out that I know people that spend time there as an orphan, and I just thought, I love the message. I loved what they were doing. Oftentimes, the Italian Home for Children was referred to as kind of the home of last resort. It's like when all else fails. School, other institutions, hospitals, you end up at the Italian Home for Children because that's the only place that will take these young kids that are so disadvantaged in one way or another, which is remarkable. So they do God's work, and don't get a lot of recognition for it. And they like a lot of other, organizations that do that type of work, fight for every dollar they can to get the funds they need to do what they do, because it's just amazing. I mean, kids get dropped off there in the middle of the night, under the worst conditions that you can't even imagine, So certainly every night that I left a board meeting, and I'm sure the same for Joey now that he's a dad, I just so much more appreciative for the special opportunities that my children had that some of these kids are that don't have and haven't had at such a young age. So a great organization, and it was a no-brainer to be part of it.
The irony is we're probably a bad representation of the Italian because it has nothing to do with being Italian other than the origin of how it started.
Yeah.
And now people outside looking in thinking you have to be Italian to be a part of the organization, which you do not. So.
Right. It's kind of a plus minus. It's so well known as the Italian Home for Children, but it's sometimes a double-edged sword because people do think it's just
when you
Italians.
do things so well. I mean, so I'm part of Irish American groups,
There you
and they do a lot of things so well when it comes to lawyers for immigration that
Yeah.
all different backgrounds use it. So then they change it to culture. They'll add a different word to it. But it's the origins originally were how it started, and when you have success in a group like that, it takes on a new meaning, and you have more resources behind it to really make a bigger impact, which is a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And awesome that you guys do that. Really, really cool, and just another connection between you two, besides the Hall of Fame as well. It's awesome.
Joey's doing everything that I did, only way better.
So
I wish that was the case.
So another similar connection is Joe just moved back to Westwood to raise his family, and you raised your family in Westwood. How special was it to you to grow to raise your family in Westwood in a town so special to you?
It was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It was a no-brainer. I mean, based on the experience that I had, and I realized that I was very fortunate because not a lot of kids would graduate and leave, and go other places. Makes perfect sense, and maybe not as many kids stayed in the town, but it was a no-brainer for me. The legacy, just the experience that I had, that I knew that I was going to raise my children in Westwood, and hope that they had half the experience that I had growing up, and I certainly think that they have. Joey's sister Tina was a basketball player and had a great little shot, and then she said she found a blow dryer and a curler, and that was it. And then Anthony, Joey's younger brother,
good athlete,
who came along a number of years later, another great athlete and football player, baseball player in his own right, and went on and played some club baseball at the Providence.
Followed his aunt to Providence.
Yeah, exactly. He's a friar.
Friar.
But no, it was an easy decision.
That's awesome.
I'm over the moon that the Fabianos are back in Westwood. Joey's there, and of course his wife Katie's a school teacher at the high school, so I couldn't be happier.
It's been very helpful to a lot of my hockey players when I was coaching, so shout out Katie. But Joe,
keep them on the ice.
Yes, that's most important. Keep them eligible.
Right.
Joe, how special is it for you to be back in Westwood?
I'll make sure she keeps him eligible. I think I'd echo a lot of what my father just said. I feel pretty lucky to be back. It was a really special place to grow up, a lot of fond memories. Inevitably, I always wanted to be back here. I don't know if it wasn't as easy on my wife. Eventually, when she got the teaching job at Westwood, thanks to Jimmy Benari leaving.
Really? She filled Jimmy's
spot. He reached out. And so we had her hooked at that point, and then I knew eventually one day we'd make our way down here. I think you do realize that you live in this bubble growing up in Westwood. You're like, this is a great town. There's nowhere else to live. Yeah. And you start looking. There is a lot of other great towns, but fortunately ended up being Westwood. And to raise my daughter here for the foreseeable future after all the history is just pretty cool.
Well, we might call her first game or her first goal on Westwood Media Center. So we'll refer back to this episode.
He'll be on the sideline with a half Medfield, half Westwood hat. He's going to be torn.
That's right.
That's true.
Jim, I want to ask, after Westwood, you went to the University of Maine, and we have a connection because I worked at the University of Maine, the broadcast team, for a year, and I actually covered the baseball team in my year there.
That's great.
But one of the big problems the University of Maine faces in terms of sports is they're no Alabama for football. They're no Duke for basketball. That's why Cooper Flagg didn't stay. What brought you to UMaine? What really sold you about going to UMaine after your time at Westwood High School?
Yeah, great question.
Scholarship?
Yes, scholarship. I did have other opportunities. Of course, the natural thing was if you're playing baseball, I got to go down south.
Yeah.
If I want to get the exposure that I was always hoping to have, with the dream of playing professional baseball. And then I did tour a couple of schools down south, and I quickly realized that I would get lost down there. And I didn't think I'd have the same opportunity to stand out if I stayed in New England and played. And I got to meet the legendary John Winkin earlier at the Ted Williams baseball camp down in Lakeville, and he was just a tenacious recruiter. And while I had other options, Maine was a Division I baseball team and had gone to the World Series a couple of years before I got there. And I thought, this is the place. I'd get some more exposure here. I'd play some great baseball. And so other than being five hours away and freezing cold, and I don't think we played a home game until 2 weeks before the school year ended, but we did play a lot of baseball, a lot of great baseball under a legendary coach. So I was thrilled with my decision to go there.
Yeah, John Winkin, the legendary coach. He actually coached at my alma mater too in his later years, Husson University. What was it like being under a guy like John Winkin? He was there for I believe from 1975 to about the late 90s. I want to say 97 off the top of my head. Coached there for 30 years, took UMaine to 6 College World Series. Playing for a guy like that who took a program, like you said, Maine, it's hard to convince people to go play in the cold like that. What's it like playing for a guy like that, and how special was he to you?
First of all, Maine is an incredible, state for recruiting baseball players and athletes. I mean, it's amazing how many good baseball players and athletes are from that state. But we just knew the game so well. I felt like I was getting coached by a major league coach, student of the game, understood the game, wasn't going to take anything less than your best performance. And you just, you wanted to play well for him. You wanted to do well, and he just brought that out at us. And I was just very fortunate to have an opportunity to play for him. He used to, down at the Ted Williams baseball camp, he was a very fit person as well. He'd get up at like 5 a.m, go swim 2 miles in the lake, and then come back and, chop wood or something, and then we'll start having a baseball, start hitting fungos or something. But, just that kind of guy, just that way, that outlook on life. Let's just take advantage of it and let's get after it.
And I actually took a moment before the show. I looked up some of your stats. You batted .226 your freshman year. I believe you had 6 stolen bases and 5 RBIs, or it's the other way around. You played your freshman year, then you decided, I believe you said in the beginning you went to your sophomore year, but then you ended up getting drafted to the minor leagues. Can you talk us through kind of how you declared for the draft then, and what made you kind of go with that process and forego some of your junior and senior years at UMaine?
Yeah, thank you. I was very fortunate to play. They have a spring program, obviously, but the normal regular season's in the spring. But they also had a fall program. So I went there as a freshman and did well my sophomore season. Did well in the spring, and felt like my goal was always I'll do whatever I can do. I would love to try to play professional baseball. It was always a dream, and so good freshman season. Started to get a little bit of attention, from I would say scouts or people around the game that were looking for talent. And so I went back my fall semester, did really well that fall. More looks and more conversation, and I had a conversation with my parents. I found out that in order for me to be eligible for the June amateur draft, I would have had to leave school after my sophomore season, sit out the spring season, or according to the NCAA rules at the time, I had to be 21 or finish my junior year. So I decided to take a chance. Ironically, I was working for the Westwood School Department, cutting grass and painting schools in the winter, and playing in the Boston Park League at night, and hoping to get a shot. I really, I had probably the best 7 or 8 games leading up to that June draft in the Boston Park League. I played for the Conley Club, the legendary Conley Club, for Red Conley. I just had I had really great games leading up to that. So, the day of the draft, I didn't know if I was going to get drafted. There were 26 teams in the major league at the time, and happened to be cutting the lawn at the back of the high school. And Coach Hargraves comes out and says, "Hey, Fabiano, I heard you're going to get drafted." I said, "Oh, Jesus, if this doesn't happen, this is going to be devastating." And I think, as I might have told you guys, around came that famous station wagon on 2 wheels, and my brother driving, he pulls up, he says, "Jimmy, the Red Sox just called the house and they drafted you, and they want to meet tonight." And so that night I signed a professional baseball contract with the Red Sox with my grandfather, who was an Italian immigrant who loved the Red Sox, and he's sitting here, my dad's sitting there, and a reporter from one of the legendary Frank Wall from
Sales
Norwood.
Wall.
Yeah, was at the table with a cigar, writing everything down, and the scout that signed me was there and signed my contract, and I was off to the Red Sox.
He used to cover Richie Hebner very closely because Norwood guys.
Yeah.
Richie Hebner didn't bat 500 his senior year. That's a remarkable stat. I don't think anyone's going to do that anytime soon. People have gotten 400s and whatnot. Softball they do it more often because that ball's coming hard off the bat. And there's a lot more singles. But baseball 500, that's incredible. I do want to ask you about. I'd be remiss not to ask you about the girls basketball back then. So what they did, simply remarkable. Your sisters, Jean, Nancy, and Linda, how important were they to you growing up as, competitors? And was there ever any competition internally about, winning? So like my sister Caroline, we would always banter back and forth and be like, "Oh, that was a nice first round exit you had there. We just won a state championship. Better luck next year." Was there ever any some competitive, fun that you had with your sisters, and how would you describe them as competitors? Just from having the inside look of being their brother.
Yeah, it was a very unique experience to have triplet sisters.
Yeah.
Born 4 days before my first birthday, and they were identical girls and certainly very, very close. And they just kind of did their own thing. I kind of did my thing, they did their thing. We really didn't bother each other too much. I think the only challenge that I had was my mom dressed them alike until they were in middle school, which was a real problem.
It's like The Shining.
When you went school shopping, the 2 of them would agree on something, and the third one say, "No, I don't think so." And we start the whole process all over again.
Yeah.
I remember that more than I probably remember anything related to sports, but. They were terrific athletes and very dedicated, and I loved watching them.
Remarkable.
Loved watching them play and the experiences that they had, both in basketball and track.
Yeah.
And, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Nancy, first girls 1,000-point scorer at Westwood High School. Amazing athlete. Went to play on at Providence. Coached, at Foxborough for many years, and then Mike. Hall of Fame athletes, so some terrific DNA in the Fabiano blood for winners, competitors, and just terrific athletes.
I didn't realize that about Nancy until Morgan had texted me.
What's that?
That she was the first 1,000-point scorer at Westwood.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Testament to the pod.
You guys have done the research.
Oh yes. But it's just simply remarkable. And Kathy Delaney Smith had a great quote. She said, "Westwood girls basketball would not have been the same if it wasn't for the Fabiano triplets."
Yeah, and that's very generous. There were a lot of phenomenal women's basketball players.
Talk about some of them. So like
the McCoys.
McCoys,
what a remarkable family. Yeah. I graduated with Mary Ann. Tremendous athlete, tremendous basketball player, but also tremendous people. Just a great family.
Unbelievable.
Football, basketball, you name it. And such quality people. Yeah. In fact, my dad talked to Mrs. McCoy today.
I love it.
She's in her 90s, and I think she might still be playing tennis, driving around her Volkswagen convertible. It's like, I want to
better shape than Joe and I.
Yeah, exactly. But and then so many
Oh, like Nancy McDermott, a
Nancy
good player.
Jackie McMullen.
Jackie McMullen. She had a sister that was, I think, a year younger.
Yeah.
Where that was a tough situation where because Jackie lost the state championship by a point to Drury, and then her sister was on the team the following year and they won. So it's she still talks about that state championships to this day. That just shows how much of a competitor she is.
Yeah.
But those are like Jim Fabiano, Jackie McMullen, Kathy Delaney Smith. These are names that make me and a lot of people proud to be from Westwood. People people that like are part of our history. And we look back and people ask you, that person's from Westwood, and I go, damn right they are.
Yeah.
And I grew up with them, and I'm so proud that because what we love to do on this podcast is bring people on that really set some amazing examples for these kids to show that these kids, you can do anything you want out of Westwood High School. We had Mark Zarther on 2 months ago.
How about that story, huh?
Won a Stanley Cup, SVP,
Not bad.
and did that, and we played with them, and just want to talk about Joe in football and guys
Far
like,
less interesting.
No, not at all.
Far less interesting.
The thing that stood out to me was you guys won 2 state championships, 2 Super Bowls, and never played a home game.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Every game was an away game. There was no home field at the time.
Yeah.
That's pretty unbelievable.
So we talk. I see Jay Risha, who, by the way, is Erica Risha's cousin, which I was.
Is that right?
I didn't know till this year.
Yeah.
But he's the voice of the Wolverines. He was the guy who did it back then for us.
Yeah.
And I say to him, we might not have had a home field, but we had that home voice. So we could have been on Mars as long as his voice is saying, Fabiano on the play, Laham. Laham on the tackle. Hearing that voice, I was like, all right, I'm ready for war. How special are those memories for you, Joe? And I want to talk about one thing is you came out as like you were starting safety your sophomore year, which we talked about it with Coach Mendel. If you're a starter, let alone a player as a sophomore, you're a stud. You're an absolute stud. There's only one kid I know that came out as a freshman, got playing time and played, was Ryan Gold.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing it as a sophomore, you're a stud. You came out, I think, like your first game, interception versus Martha's Vineyard. And we talk about with these kids, the football kids, I say, football is an interesting sport. You remember that first game where you're like, all right, not only can I play at this level, but I can be pretty damn good.
Yeah.
I think I know that play in that game, your sophomore year, playing Bellingham, and he's kick returning too. He took 2 touchdowns back against Bellingham, or Ricky Santos Bellingham, coach of UNH, for touchdowns. Was that when you knew, like, all right, I can be a baller out here? Or was
I don't know if you ever really remember.
Or was it the pick 6 versus Martha's Vineyard? That was a good one too.
They're all great moments. When I think back to stuff like that, any great memory really, especially as it relates to football, I think it's a testament to Paul Hallion and Coach Mendel and just how they empowered you to be a leader at a young age and trusted you to go out there and gave you confidence to do the things that you're capable of doing. So I was fortunate to play for them, and I think they're a big part of that.
Yeah. And you wore the number 32.
Yep.
It has a really cool meaning. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was very close to my grandmother and grandfather, and my grandfather wore 32 at Dedham, which I eventually was fortunate enough to be able to go on and wear in Pop Warner, and then eventually into high school. And then funny enough, when I got to college, I'd emailed the coach, which I committed to Assumption. And I was like, hey, by chance, is 32 available? And thankfully it was. So I wore 32 in college as well. So
Nice.
all because of my grandfather, which
Nice.
Was a blessing.
And you were a running back. You came in, you were running back your whole life. And I think you made the move your junior year. And great move, by the way. If you come out with the stats of what he did, it's probably, over 1,000 yards of receiving, 10 plus touchdowns. And then on the defensive end, he was doing like 10 interceptions a year, which remarkable. How seamless was that move for you to go to receiver? Did it take some time to kind of get comfortable with it, or was it, you're used to it because you'd catch balls out of the backfield?
I'd like to think it was my decision. It really wasn't. And it did all work out for the better. But I remember, I think it was probably going into junior year maybe. I played running back my whole life. And I sat down with Coach Mendel and Coach Hallion. They said, hey, listen, we want to have him play running back. And, we obviously think you're skilled enough at wide receiver, but it's what's best for the team. And I think in retrospect, being so immature at that age, I probably was frustrated for a day or two, but ultimately it was the best thing. And and it really worked out. So
Worked out very well. Westwood High School Hall of Famer. Didn't really slow down after that. You went to Assumption. You're sixth all time in career receptions with 123. Fifth for the most receptions in a season was 62, and you're ninth in career receiving yards with 1,361. You know, that's pretty remarkable for someone who said junior year, we'll give it a shot. We'll wing it. You had a fantastic quarterback, Jeff White. You also had a fantastic receiver on the other side in Laham. How much did you guys feed off of each other? Big games, you know, Coach Pindell talks about this play. I said, what's the riskiest play you ever called? And he brought up this random play that I absolutely remember.
the screen pass.
No, it was that was one. But he talks about Bellingham, where we were on the goal line and they were blitzing, and he threw Jeff threw like a 65-yard ball to you on the sideline. Somehow you stayed in,
Yeah.
and then scored the touchdown, like 97-yard touchdown. You know, and he mentions that. But like how to go back to the original question, you know, how much did you guys feed off of each other? And, you know, really just build what you built, a complete, you know, an explosive offensive machine, you know, on the offensive side of the ball.
It was a huge piece of it. And I think obviously you can attest to this and living through it, and you're definitely a big part of that. I think it was such a competitive culture, in some ways probably too competitive, but I think at the end of the day we were friends. When we were out there, we were just driving each other. Chris caught a touchdown. I wanted to do the same thing the next play.
Yeah.
We're both probably yelling at Jeff simultaneously to make sure we get the ball. So it was a huge piece of it. I think it certainly motivated us to go out and be better players, and, you know, ultimately benefited the team in the long run.
You guys definitely made me better because I got to go up against you guys every single day, and you're 100% correct. We used to be so competitive. There would be a lot of smack talk, and, you know, whoever got the best of each other, you know, got to, you know, hold that above the person that practice and carry it into the next one. But it was great. I think that I'd like to know your feedback. I think that's a great thing to have for a winning culture is internal competition during practice, competing like it's the game. And when you have these assets, when you have the best receiver in your league and you have a really good cornerback, and they're pushing each other, what a advantage to have as a team, but also to set that example of if you practice hard, you're going to make games easy, you know? Do you think that's like a good quality for teams is practicing hard and competing like that? Yeah, there's going to be some smack talk. There's going to be, you know, some, you know, ruffling of feathers every now and then during practice, but I think it benefited us. You know, what are your thoughts on, like, from a winning culture perspective? Is that good for practice?
I think it's huge. I think it's, you know, as long as it's healthy, I think it's, you know, driving each other and making sure every day is competitive and practice, not only the games. And I think it's just a huge piece of, you know, helping build the team and, you know, ultimately achieving, you know, the most success that you possibly can.
Yeah.
I can tell you that 20 years later, you guys have been friends for all these years, pushing each other, and that competitive still goes on.
I mean, fundamentally, Westwood, it definitely created a culture of, like, it didn't matter if we were playing basketball at Morrison, we were paying spit at the kitchen or whatever, the cafe table at lunch. Like, everybody was going out there to win. Doesn't matter what it was. Fantasy baseball.
I also noticed too, like, when we bring alumni back that were, you know, successful, they're also successful in their professional lives. Do you see a lot of correlations with discipline you've picked up from sports, working in a team environment, you know, working with the team, taking leadership? Do you see a strong correlation of, like, the things you've learned in sports carrying over into your professional lives and having success, you know, in your professional life?
You know, I'll start just really quickly. The only time I ever answered, and you guys might even know what a classified ad is, in the help wanted section. Sorry about that. But we used to have, you know, the help wanted section of the Boston Sunday Globe was thick, you know, with jobs that were posted. That's how you found a job, you know. And the only ad I ever answered, the headline was sports minded. Yeah. And I said, that's me. And I answered it, and it was an insurance company looking for salespeople. And I said to them, what does that have to do with sports?
Yeah.
And the guy said, you know, team-oriented, competitive, and went down the list, and I said, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. And when I later on got a chance to be a manager and start to hire people, I started using the sports-minded ad, and for the very same reason, because I think there's a direct correlation.
Yeah. What would you guys say to Westwood High School students that aren't involved in sports today? They might be freshmen, sophomores. Of why they should get involved, and what are some of those positive benefits that might carry over if they get themselves involved? You know, at the end of the day, you know, it's not a really bad risk. You're not going to lose much. You're going to gain so much.
Sure.
What advice would you give for kids to get involved?
I mean, I would absolutely encourage them to. But honestly, playing professional baseball changed a lot of my way of looking at youth sports and so forth. And I realized that it's extraordinarily difficult to get to that point. And why not then enjoy the ride and not put as much emphasis on the winning part of it? So if you can get with the right team and the right coach that has the right approach, whether it's, youth baseball or high school baseball or what have you, jump at the chance to be part of that. I know that there are some instances where maybe there's too much emphasis on the winning, and I don't know, maybe you find something else or find a different team. But just the idea of getting involved in to do something, and whatever that might be, to push yourself, to try something, whether it works or doesn't work, it's the trying that matters more than, what you ultimately succeed. If you succeed, great, that's a bonus. But to be able to participate and say that I tried, I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
In that sort of same vein of giving advice to students, today at Westwood High School, as of the date of filming this, was signing day for some students. And there are students going off, Dante Martucci's going to Assumption. Lillian Golisarian for golf is going to Penn State. What's some advice you would give to the senior class that's starting to sign and go to colleges as they're, entering that next stage of their life? What's some advice as former college athletes you would give to them?
Well, Joey's a lot closer to their experience than I am. But
My message is very simple. It's just try and enjoy the end of your senior year. Westwood's a really special place where, a lot of great friendships are formed. You've learned so much. It's just an incredible foundation for the rest of your life. And you're going to go on to do great things in college and thereafter. But enjoy, again, it's very simple, but just enjoy what you have left.
I think, and I totally agree with that, Joey. I think when you get to that next level, it's more intense. There's more at stake, and I think you just have to be aware of that and ready to push yourself. Because it's going to take another level of effort, another level of dedication to compete at a college level for sure. Those are some great schools, and if you're willing to put the work in, it can certainly be a great reward in the end. By the way, I just want to add, I always told Joey played hockey.
I did. He was a hockey player. Yeah.
I know you're from a legendary hockey family. Joey played hockey, I think, until maybe Pee-wees.
Yeah.
And I always used to tell people, if Joey could have worn cleats on the ice, I think he could have gone to the NHL.
He would always say, "I'm coming out this year, and I'd tell Welby, and he'd be like, "Oh, he knew the Fabiano name. Like no one, you go through Westwood, he class of '91. It doesn't matter. He knows the Fabiano name. He's like thinking, oh,
my hockey career was less than impressive. And Joe and him, when I was going to college, was like, "Hey, listen, you're fast. You can catch. Come play basketball." I'm like, "You know what? Sounds good to me."
Yeah. Well, you were a good hockey player. I remember back in the day, you had the half shield, half cage.
I had all the gear.
He had the Mighty Ducks gear. He definitely was a Mighty Ducks fan. Fulton Reed,
definitely. Oh, definitely.
But he was fast on skates. Ryan Murphy. He was a hockey player too, and
sure.
it was like he was running in the mud on skates. But man, he could shoot the puck and he could hit. But Joe had some good speed and. I think he very well could have made the team if he had come out.
You know what it was? Everybody went to go to Hyde Park, and
That's
I
true.
think I distinctly remember it was just me and Matt Siebert basically, and there was a few others I'm definitely forgetting, but everybody had left. It was just me and Matt. We were probably 0-25 for 2 straight seasons. And I'm like, Matt, you're pretty good. I'm not, so I think this is time for me to retire.
So part of the reason I got into calling games and even just like the podcast is it's just a sad story about positive ending about my uncle when he was very sick and it was right around COVID. The doctor told him you'd maybe have a couple days and it was tough news for him to take. But the first people that showed up, not only just family but were his high school teammates, and the thing that he loved the most was talking to them about the high school days. The hockey championships they won. The practices, you remember this, do you remember that? and they were some of the closest friends he had till the day he passed away.
Sure.
But on his deathbed, he was talking about high school memories.
Yeah, yeah.
And these go on and on for decades to come. You know, when you connect with like your old teammates, there's a bond. You could go 5 years without talking to some of your friends,
Sure.
and you pick up where the conversation's left off. But how much, when you talk to these good friends of yours, does these old sports memories come up in conversation? And has it changed, decades later, since?
Yeah, well, I mean, I had the good opportunity to obviously play with so many great athletes and people, and then after my baseball days, I then played softball in the over 30 league in Islington for nearly 20 years, and played with a lot of the guys that I went to high school with, and all of that, all those memories, all that competition came flooding back. Dave Rice.
Yeah.
Dave Rice is the Westwood athletic historian.
He is.
Right?
He's unbelievable.
And if he will inevitably shoot me a text, some random text of some random memory that came across his, I don't know what, and I'm like, oh my God, how does he?
He's a legend.
Where does he come up with all of this?
Yeah, he's got a lab.
He won't let us
sports
forget.
lab.
He will not let us forget, which I so appreciate because so many great memories.
So
Now Morgan's going to carry the torch for him.
I am. So one thing that he's amazing at, he has his teammates' backs. So he will reach out to me about different guys in that era. So like one guy, for example, was a goalie he had Westwood and at Nichols, McWade.
Chris McWade.
McWade.
Yes. Yeah.
And he loved him. He loved him. And Chris, sadly, we lost him too soon.
Yeah.
But Dave makes sure that his memory lives on. And that the younger generation know about these guys.
Dave is. I'm very thankful for Dave because he keeps those memories alive, and because they could easily just go by the wayside. You know what I mean? That was then. This is now, kind of thing. But I'm so thankful that he doesn't let us forget.
Yeah. And I'll tell you how important those memories are, folks. Joe, in your wedding, how many of your groomsmen were teammates of yours? And we'll even get it more granular. How many of them were?
You're really doing your research.
How many were Westwood teammates?
I think all of them, with the exception of one, and there was 12 total.
And I say to these kids, and I used to say it in the locker room with the hockey players, and it'd be probably during like the biggest games, and I'd say, guys, have fun. These are going to be the best memories. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Just don't make it twice.
Yeah.
But these are some of the best friends you're going to have in life. And I guarantee when you guys get married, some of these guys in this room will be there, So this is something special you have here. Don't forget it. Enjoy the moment and go out there and get it done.
That's great. Great advice. Great advice. But
I always used to find it really funny going to visit friends in college. The Westwood guys would only do things in packs.
Yes,
so they'd be like, when you're going to visit their friends and family, they'd be like, oh, here come the Westwood guys again. But it was like at a minimum 10 people. But
And then Westwood got like a cool culture where people love Westwood people. So it's like your college friends can be friends with your Westwood friends, and then you're like they're going to like a Red Sox game and you're cut out of it. And it's like they're close enough friends now that they're hanging out without me. But guys, this is super special. Two names. Just the Fabiano name, but two. People I highly respect when it comes to sports. The coaching you did over the years was awesome. Just being there, Pop Warner, baseball was huge. And Joe, couldn't think of a better teammate when it comes to winning. Someone that I can't remember how many times you'd be out there defensively making big tackles, and I'd be like, where the heck did he come from? Famous picture of the tackle on J.J. Sullivan. There's like 6 of us. A host of Westwood tacklers.
I had a chance, Morgan, to coach. I thought this was like one of my great sports moments when Joey and you guys were playing Pop Warner and having all this success. And the following season, the legendary Phil Azak said, "Hey, Coach Fabiano, why don't you come on the coaching staff?"
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I played football my freshman year, but I don't know if I'm an X's and O's guy. What can I do? He goes, yeah, I want you on the staff. So we went through the preseason, and the first game came around on a Sunday, and I had my coaching jacket on. I was feeling good about myself. My friend Joe Federico and I were talking. I said, Joe, I don't know what I'm supposed to do still yet.
What's my role?
And then Coach Azak came over and said, hey, Coach Fabiano, here's what I need you to do today. When we kick off, I need you to run on the field and grab the tee and get it off as fast as possible. Can you do that? I said, I'll give it my best.
Hopefully the body holds up.
That was my coaching contribution to.
You were great cerebral. You would say, great job and all that. And that small stuff, it goes a long way. But you know what? I've learned that people that are like athletes, understand just you don't have to know the game, but you understand kind of what the goals are, and how to keep people focused on those goals. And I remember the jacket you're talking about because I see Coach Hoff still wearing it around town, and it fits him like a glove. So kudos to Coach Hoff. He's been doing to stay in shape. He's still wearing the jacket from 26 years back. It's very impressive.
Well, Morgan, thank you and the staff and team here for what you're doing for Westwood sports. I mean, the shame of it all is that people don't know and people don't learn from the history and hopefully they can take something from the podcast and the conversations that will help, as you mentioned, some of the current and future athletes of the town, because what a wonderful culture, what a wonderful, winning culture, but just great experience, quality people that you want to get a chance to be a part of. And thanks for bringing some of these stories and keeping them alive.
Totally.
Brings back a lot of memories.
I would definitely echo that. I mean, even just sitting here listening to the stories, I think you realize just like, whether it was, your generation to ours, like there's a lot of underlying themes from the people, the competitive nature of the town, success, and, that's perpetuated itself over a long period of time.
Joe, my final comment was that Joey growing up, he played basketball and I'd say, Joey, on that shot, maybe, and he'd say, Dad, okay. And, football. I said, Joey, Dad. And then baseball, I said, Joey, maybe, he goes, I said, Joey, you're going to tell me I don't know about baseball? and he'd say, well, you only played minor league baseball. So it's
but that's the true dad-son relationship. You got to needle a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But
thank you.
Morgan wasn't too dissimilar. He was a stubborn guy too.
Oh, we used to do it. My dad used to say, "I can't wait for you to have kids, so they can turn out like you and drive you nuts, And I was like, all right,
that's starting to happen.
Yes, but no, it's so appreciative of you guys coming on because I wish I had the mindset at a young age to tap into these amazing athletes in Westwood because. They know what it's like to put that jersey on in a big game versus a Holliston. Harvey Krumpnick was the coach for you against you. He was a coach against us. Holliston. So you know what it's like to put that uniform on to play against a Harvey Krumpnick team, and we did it as well. But to just be able to learn from people that came through the same walls as we did, with the same pride and the same competitive spirit. But also, I'd love to tap in. After graduating college, how can I be successful as a professional? Well, you know what? A great way to start is think about what you did during your sports days, but then tapping into guys like yourselves and Mark Zarther and hearing his path, is hugely beneficial for Westwood residents and also Westwood students. So, we are very thankful for the opportunity to hear from you guys. Tell your story.
Thank you.
An amazing story and
appreciate it.
A fun story as well. Appreciate it, guys, and thank you all for tuning in. Wolverine Report episode. Looking forward to seeing you all on the next one.